Thank you, Eunice, and thank you for joining us for today's StrongHER panel. It's a panel discussing Black female leadership, breaking the glass ceiling, and Black women making an impact within the community. It's my pleasure to be with all of you today celebrating womanhood. Our panelists today, Bobbie Knight, the current president of Miles College, a historically Black college and university located in Fairfield, Alabama, and the first woman president of that university in the school's 122-year history. DeJuana Thompson is the creator of Woke Vote, an organization that invests in the activation and long-term engagement, training, and development of new organizers and mobilization of historically disengaged voters of color. Also, Alexus Cumbie. She's the founder of Birmingham's Literary Vibes, which is a grassroots organization dedicated to increasing literacy rates in low socioeconomic communities. And she's a recent graduate of the University of Alabama. Also, Tracey Morant Adams, a senior executive vice president and the chief community development and corporate social responsibility officer for Renasant Bank. She's responsible for leading and directing the development of community programs and initiatives throughout Renasant's corporate footprint, which support economic and community development. Also, Pastor Tiandria Ellis. She's the founder of the Surge Project Incorporated. That's a nonprofit devoted to youth advocacy for inner city youth, and also the senior leader at the Hill Community Church. I want to thank all of you for joining us as Pastor T gets in here on this panel. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to start with this question on this Freedom Fest that we celebrate with you, President Knight. What does freedom mean to you?
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And thank you for allowing me to participate in this panel with this group of wonderful women, exciting group of women. Freedom to me means that I have the ability to live my life without undue constraints. And what I want to achieve, I can, as long as it's within the boundaries of the law.
Okay, and same question for you, DeJuana. Freedom, what does it mean?
Thank you, Sherri, and I'm honored to be amongst this great, I want to say, cloud of witnesses of women that we have today. And for me, freedom really is the ability to imagine a future. I think that a lot of people in our communities right now across the country struggle with the idea of whether or not they can see a light at the end of the tunnel. And to me, being able to see that light, to know that you can have a quality of life, that is, to me, freedom.
Alexus Cumbie, you work with young people. Tell me what freedom means to you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherri. And I just want to thank all the other panelists for being here. It truly is an honor to share this room with you. So when I think about freedom, I think of this concept that I like to call being fully human. So how do we make sure that everyone has dignity, integrity, and lives a life where they have a reciprocated respect within society?
And our next panelist, freedom to you, Ms. Morant Adams.
Thank you so very much, Sherri, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to join today's panel. Freedom to me represents empowerment. It's liberating myself outside of what others would expect. And it's this liberation that allows me to advocate for others so that they too are empowered.
To be truly free. Pastor T, what does freedom mean to you?
I will admit I struggle with this just a little bit. Just kind of thinking through whether or not freedom is actually something that exists, or if we just feel a sense of freedom. But pulling myself out of that hole of discovery, I came up with this definition and I settled on it. And it's this: freedom is the ability to think, to move as, or to be one's authentic self, but not without fighting against social constructs and normative social influences.
Thank you all for those definitions for what freedom means to you personally. Freedom and strength kind of go hand in hand because you have that power. President Knight, can you share a time with us when being strong meant that you had to sacrifice or delay a particular goal?
Yes, Sherri, thank you. So I'm probably the oldest person on the panel, so I've lived a lot of life. and had a very, very lengthy career before coming to Miles College. But there was a time when I was a caregiver early on in my career for my brother, and then for my mother, and then later on for my husband. And what I have discovered for me is being strong meant I could make that decision to step back from my career goals, and put my family first. And it was, at the time, I had to weigh that out and figure out, is this the right thing for me? But it absolutely was the right thing for me and for my family.
So we're on this panel with StrongHER, and this idea of strength and power for each of you. And let me go to you, DeJuana, on this, just to ask about strength and embodying that. How do you personally embody strength?
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm a person of faith, a woman of faith, and that really informs the way in which I view the world, how I operate in the world. And my dad would tell us something. He's a pastor here in Birmingham. He would tell us something all the time growing up, and his thing that he would say is that you negotiate nothing out of fear. Nothing. And I took that into every part of my life, whether it was relationships, whether it was school, whether it was work. I knew that even if I wasn't quite sure what the decision was, or what if it was the best decision, I knew that I had to be in a sound mind to make it. And so you can't be, with fear, it brings in too much cloudiness. So you have to find yourself getting to a place of figuring out, okay, I know that I will be okay, even if I have to start all the way over again, even if it was the wrong decision, I will still be okay. And so for me, it really is that negotiating nothing out of fear, and just knowing that I have something in me, the strength in me to still be able to exist.
And so for the panel, when we think about strength, and when people look at women, especially Black women, you always hear she's a strong Black woman. And Tracey, let me ask you, when you hear that in particular, what does that make you feel? What does it mean to you?
Thank you, Sherri. That's really a great question. And I would say no, not at all does it hold a negative connotation for me. Yet I do feel it's necessary to modify the narrative of what this means, so that we're not putting unrealistic or unhealthy expectations upon ourselves as Black women by attempting to be all and do all for everyone. However, we must not allow the reverence of this term, strong Black woman, to be relegated to a negative depiction of the Black female, a depiction that perhaps evolved from the different circumstances of our ancestors. Whether it's the quiet warrior who nurtures our children, or the gentle angel who offers compassion to a struggling neighbor, they too are strong Black women, just as strong as the community advocate, voting activist, college president, recent college graduate, TV anchor, or business leader. At some point, we must all be strong. The circumstances resulting from the gender, racial, and economic disparities we face today require our strength to broker a better future for our children, similar to what our mothers and grandmothers did decades ago. And that to me is certainly okay.
So I like that, because it brings up this sort of modeling of what we see and what we repeat. And so let me pose this question to you, Alexus. Who is that beacon of strength for you? You are our young person on the panel, a recent graduate. Who's been that beacon of strength for you?
I think that's a great question. Thankfully, I come from a family where I'm the youngest of 8. And so I had 7 really great role models in front of me. But I think about my sister April right now, who's 2 years older than me. And she embodies strength to me in a way that almost seems like unreal. Just having a sister there to be able to walk through life so close. And so you still smell the fragrance of her being in the room right there, and just being able to lead under her and watch how she's grown. I've definitely modeled a lot of the things that she's taught me.
Pastor T, you work with young people. As a person that's kind of in the middle, then, how do you try to model strength to the young people you work with?
I try to model strength in the way I respond to negativity. And I think that it's important for young people to see someone address negativity in a healthy way. It's okay to not like something, and it's also okay to address it in a more respectful manner. And so I just feel like personally, every time I choose, to love people who are imperfect like me, but who doesn't like me, I feel I model strength. I feel I model strength every time, I choose to persevere when everything around me is saying, give up. I feel I model strength every time I choose to make a move, muting the influence of amplified voices and vices that may be saying, hey, you're too much, or you should calm down so that you don't disturb the peace of those who are content with conformity.
Okay, DeJuana Thompson, when we talk about strength, especially the line of work that you do with helping voters and getting those people who are disengaged back in the process, strength in community is that collective part of it. So how do you translate that into the work you do and the people you work with?
Well, I think mostly it's about being authentic. I think people in this line of work, if they feel for a second that you don't care about them, or that you're only in it for political gain or finance or whatever it may be, you will lose whatever little bit of credibility you may have had from the beginning. So it really starts with building true relationships with the community, being there when it's not an election season, showing up, for what we would call critical issues that already impact the community. So for instance, during COVID, yes, it was census time. Yes, it was during the middle of a primary season. But when we were talking to people, we were asking them, do you have masks? Do you have food? Do you have those, essential items that you need as a human being? And then we'll talk to you about voting later, because if we can't show that humanity, we definitely won't be able to bring people back into a fold that they're already so critical of. And so for me, it's training my organizers, training my team to operate from an authentic place that shows, that we understand that voting is just one part of an existence. It's one part of a liberation strategy, but how we do that well and how we're well as a community, that's what really draws people to leadership.
And so in StrongHER, I think about women, I think about us as Black women, we do show up. We did that powerfully in the last big election. Some of the topics, so I want to get into colorism a little bit and ask you guys how it has affected the way individuals treat you in the workplace. And so for that, Tracey, I'm going to go to you, and then I want to get to President Knight on that as well. But Tracey, how has that affected you in your work?
Well, first, it saddens me to say that it has. Throughout my 30-year career, I've faced discrimination, and certainly that is troubling because we know it's not right. Racial injustice is a societal ill that has to stop. And I'm so thrilled and pleased to see the attention that is challenging the ill of racial inequality in our nation right now. And I'm equally thrilled to see a movement being led by young folk, really invigorating activists who are saying enough is enough. I've been blessed throughout my career to have wonderful mentors and sponsors who I think have helped to shield some of those unfortunate circumstances that many of my sisters face. And I'm extremely pleased to see now so much intentionality by companies being taken to really improve internally the practices in the workplace in order to ensure and strengthen equity, diversity, and inclusion in our various companies of work. But yes, it has impacted me, but we must persevere and move through it and grow stronger going through those trials.
President Knight, you recently wrote an essay to help people outside of the Black community understand how they could be allies. What prompted that? And just the same question I posed to Tracey on how colorism has affected your career, if it has.
Okay, so that's two questions, but may I take the liberty of going back to Tracey's first point about being a strong Black woman? I want to say just one thing about that. I want to share something about that. There is a study that was written by Dr. Amani M. Allen. She's an associate professor of community health science and epidemiology at UC Berkeley. And one of the things she says, which really supports what Tracey said, is that even when you have on this armor, you put on your armor of a strong Black woman, it's not necessarily negative, because it actually protects us in a way from our bodies being unhealthy due to stress. So for whatever reason, I really want to go back and really dig into her study, but I wanted to point that out because if anybody's interested in reading that, it started out being a really good read. On colorism, it would be very disingenuous for any woman of color to say that she has not been affected by colorism in her life. I just don't know any other way to answer that. Yes, the answer is yes. And has it been throughout my whole life? Absolutely. Then the second question you asked was about the article that I wrote in a recent, girlfriend of mine who has a company out of DC asked me to write an op-ed or an article for her newsletter to go out to her clients across the country, and basically helping them figure out how they can deal with and what they should do around this social injustice phenomena. That's what you want to call it. But what I talked about, I looked back at the history of Miles College, and Reverend Frank Dukes, who was the SGA president back in 1962, I believe, wrote a piece called, was a manifesto really, called This We Believe. And I went back and looked at what Frank Dukes wrote, and then I looked back over my career and things that impacted me. And I looked at what we had to offer at Miles College. We had already started the process of developing a Center for Economic and Social Justice. So I took This We Believe and basically wrote a manifesto of my own. And it absolutely incorporates being intentional, intentionality that corporate leaders, business leaders, wherever you are, you have to be intentional about your desires and your motives and your whatever you want to do to affect change. And if you are that, and if that's, you can only be authentic if you're intentional, is what I believe. And so I'd be happy to share that article, but I believe that Miles College has the history of working with individuals and entities throughout the years, and we're here to do that even now.
You guys are all, I think, leaders, no doubt. When you ask as a leader, as a woman who leads, as a Black woman who leads, about barriers, they can come from different places. And so, Pastor T, you've been out front on some social issues as well. Are there particular barriers that you feel you face as a woman leading?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say even more so as a woman in ministry, there's a particular standard that people have that is just not equal to our male colleagues. And we are held to a higher standard. And so you get fire, you get, the negativity. And so I absolutely experienced that being out on the front lines. It's tragic, but it's necessary fire to keep us going.
Alexus, as a young person, everything's in front of you, and we believe that for all of our young people, that they can have it all. Have you experienced problems where race, color, being a woman, that any of those have hindered you in going after what it is you want to do?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things we have to do as Black women, but not even as just as Black women, but as people, we have to take inventory of our identities. And so for me, being such a young person, I always have to battle when it comes to job applications or just experiences saying, hey, I know that I'm young, but we don't need to look at the age or the number. We need to look at the wealth of experience that person has. What do they bring to the room? And I think that's something that's really important for any leader to keep in mind, that just because someone has a degree, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have more experience than a person who may not have had the opportunity. So when we break down barriers, we have to take personal inventory. What do we bring to a room, and what does that person bring to a room, and how do we respect that?
DeJuana, I see you nodding, so I would just want to get you to chime in on that.
Yeah, I think that my path was so non-traditional and so unorthodox in terms of the different things that led me to the next opportunity, that when I ultimately ended up as an appointee in the Obama administration at the White House, and I was sort of trying to tell the story of how I got from being a member or working for the Birmingham City Council to being a member of the White House staff, nobody would have, really thought that my trajectory would have led me there. And if I had listened to people telling me, well, I don't think you ought to take that opportunity, or I don't think you should move there, or, because people sometimes, they talk to you from the frame of their own experience and from the frame of their own limitation. And so I was so blessed to grow up in a household with parents who were willing to dream as big as I was dreaming. And they never said, I don't know about that. They just said, I'm gonna pray about it. Did you pray about it? And if we had all prayed about it, it was like, it's a go. And so I think for me, I'm always trying to bring into the experience, particularly for young Black women who want to matriculate sort of through the political space, that you don't have to have done this a certain kind of way. Figure out your best path. Get some very strong mentors. I have to shout out mentors like Judge Carol Smitherman and people like Dr. Janetta Cole, women who were so strong and who were trailblazers on their own, who could say to me, it's okay if your path didn't look like, somebody else, but you still have validity in this space. And so now I'm saying the exact same thing to those young people who may not necessarily be in college, but want to run for office, right? I'm telling them it's okay if your path was different. There's still room for you. There's still impact that you can make.
President Knight, I want you to respond for that, because when you talk about a path that doesn't look like where you think it's going, your career has sort of been that from what we see on the outside looking in. What would you say to that?
So here's what I would say. It does not matter what your degree is in, whether you have one or not. When you are determined to do something, you can do it. I did have a very non-traditional path that I followed. And now I'm doing something that, hey, you couldn't have told me 5 years ago that I'd be doing this. I mean, I was happily retired. But I feel that sometimes for DeJuana, for instance, she had a calling. This too is my calling. I don't even consider this work. Even though I work incredibly hard, it is something that I have developed a passion for. And I realized that I had this passion my whole life, and that is helping other people, helping in particular young people develop their careers or what have you. So why not do it at this level? It's basically how I live.
With that ability to meet the moment, Pastor T, she talks about when people have that calling, a lot of times we choose a path and we want to go that way. Sometimes we ignore our calling, but it's always coming back. Let me ask you to just weigh in on that power of believing in yourself and having faith that whatever that seed is that's been planted in you that won't go away, that you could pursue it, that you should pursue it.
Absolutely. I just feel that there are always going to be things that will suggest you shouldn't do it. There are going to be things that you face within yourself, internal struggles, things that, you You may think you're so limited or your resources are limited. And so you'll feel like it's something you can't do because, you know, you just don't have all of the necessary tools. But even with limitations, right, because we all have them, even with strengths, weaknesses, whatever it is, you still can do what you've been called to do. It doesn't mean you're going to always do it perfectly. And I think that some people mess up because they have this idea of perfection. And if I can't do it perfectly, then I shouldn't do it at all. And that's not true. Those who succeed in life, I can guarantee you at some point they have failed in some way, including pastors. And I know that people, you know, have this, you know, pedestal they like to put pastors on, and they make them non-human beings. But even pastors, local leaders, you know, anybody in a leadership position, we are all capable of error. We are all capable of failing, but it does not mean that you shouldn't pursue what you've been called to do. There are going to be challenges. Have I been challenged as a young woman in ministry for 21 years? Absolutely. I have experienced bias. I have experienced decisions being made on the basis of nepotism or cronyism, you know, but it didn't stop me from doing what I needed to do. I started a nonprofit organization for youth after my brother was murdered. He was shot in the head, 2 young Black men, right? And so I started an organization so that we could help save as many young people as possible. We could help redirect misguided anger, you know, and yes, I started with limited resources, and I work from now limited resources, but you don't give up because you understand that there is someone out there. I don't care if it's one person you help change their lives. Do it for the one. Even the Bible tells us there are 99 sheep still in the pasture. You still go for the one. So whatever it is that God has called a person to do, whatever it is that a person feels drawn to, you can't allow anything to stop you from doing it, not even yourself.
Tracey, let me ask you this. Because of what you do, this idea of being prepared in this holistic way, do you think that young women are getting that message that in themselves, they can be prepared in and of themselves to meet a moment, to meet a calling?
I do. I do believe that they are receiving that. And what is so beautiful to me is that the young woman of today does not feel pulled back or held back by societal norms that perhaps President Knight or I felt as we were moving through the career path. They are so it's just beautiful to me, the energy and the confidence and the courage and conviction that young women today are demonstrating, and they do not feel limitations from what I perceive as I'm looking back and speaking with young women who I have the opportunity to mentor, and they mentor me. They don't feel those limitations that thus would mitigate their effectiveness. And I think that's why they're doing such remarkable things. Not to say that previous generations have not. Certainly they have. And hopefully in some way we have paved the path for these incredible young leaders of today. But what I am so, again, encouraged by with these women is that they have the courage and the conviction, which I feel is so vitally important as you are moving forward in whatever path you're called to be in or that you may have chosen, that you have that courage and conviction to do what you know is right and to stand upon that.
And so in StrongHER, I think StrongHER, we are stronger together. And so I want to just ask you guys as we close out to think on this and give me your reflection. And this is going to go back to President Knight, your essay, What I Believe. This I believe. I'm going to start with you, Pastor T, and then we'll work our way back up to President Knight before closing. Pastor T, this I believe.
This I believe that there is no limit. The sky is not the limit. Okay. you will only be the limit. I believe. Anything you want to do, you can do. This, I believe, although we have different things, barriers that, surround us, anything you want to achieve, you can do. And this, I believe, especially for, those who may go into ministry at some point, you can either decide to focus on what's most important, or you can fight against things that don't matter, like sexism, right? Or machismo. You can decide to do that, or you can decide to do the work and let the work argue for you, right? And I would say this, I choose the latter. You let the work speak for you. Sometimes you do not have to respond with your words. You respond with your work. You respond with your results. This, I believe, especially for young women who, go into ministry, again, because that's my area. That's my heart. You don't dumb down yourself, to seem less intimidating. Okay. That would be like, putting yourself in prison for a crime you did not commit, and reparations are scarce, right? And they do not make up for lost ambition or lost time. And lastly, I would say this, I believe it's imperative that you work hard at being authentic, because being someone else is extremely difficult. And typically everyone else can see that you're not being yourself. It's way more rewarding to just do what you have been born to do. I personally believe I was born with a burden to care for those who are helpless, those who are sick, those who are hopeless, those who are feel that they are unlovable, or those who feel unloved. I feel that that's my burden. And I just believe that I will never allow anything to stop me. And I hope that, future generations to come of young women in ministry will take that same approach.
That was powerful, Pastor T. Alexus, Cumbie, the same question to you. This, I believe, is your prompt.
So this, I believe that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And so I think we need to pay more attention to us young folk. We have great ideas, new ideas, and we have unprecedented access to resources and tools that people have never had access to, which is social media, which gives us access to communities that people have been begging and praying to have access to. So listen to us. I think that we have really, really, really great techniques and methods that could really amplify the work that people are already doing. So.
Tracey, how about you? This, I believe.
This, I believe, just as I was taught 45 years ago as a girl growing up in rural Talladega County, that if I put my mind to it, anything I desired by trusting in the good Lord could be mine. This, I believe, that if I work hard for a hard day of work, I would deserve a good day of pay. That's what Daddy taught me. And as I have continued to advance, I put all of that into this, I believe, that there can be no social justice without gender justice.
Well, this, I believe, that everything that we need to liberate our communities is already in our communities. And I think that as we do the work of uncovering, rediscovery, as we do the work of reimagination, and rebuilding in our communities, I believe that we will see that promise that so many of our ancestors fought for, so many of our current leaders are still fighting for, and our next generation is currently taking up the fight. And so one of my favorite quotes that sort of informs the work that I do is by Mahatma Gandhi. And he said that there are people in this world who are so hungry that God can only appear to them in the form of bread. What do I take from that? I take from that I have to first meet some needs. Before I can present what I believe to be a gracious God, I have to present what I've experience from that God. Before I can present what is a great education, I have to present what that education can do for me, right? And what it can do for them. Before I can present justice, I have to present the idea that it's possible. And so for me, I am out here on a presentation tour to make sure that people can reimagine what their community can be, what their lives can be, and work towards that.
You, President Knight from Miles College, you gave the inspiration for that. But this, I believe
is that the only competition we have is ourselves. And if we are truly our authentic selves, show up as who we are, we will be successful. This I believe.
Powerful. This is a dynamic panel of women. I hope that people have been encouraged, empowered by what you've said. I have been encouraged and empowered from listening to you. I want to thank each of you, Bobbie Knight, Pastor T. Ellis, Tracey Morant Adams, DeJuana Thompson, Alexus Cumbie. Thank each of you for being a part of this StrongHER panel. I believe we are StrongHER together.
All right.